This is Scoreboard with Chris Titley. Powered by Swiftex. Where can crypto take you?
Hi, it's Chris Titley here on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast. I am joined by Tony Shaw. Tony, thanks so much for being part of this series.
Chris, pleasure to be here.
We're sitting here on Thursday, the 23rd of April, in a glorious Brisbane day. How's your April been so far, Tony, and how's the start of 2026 for you?
Oh, the year's been charging on before you know it. It's almost May. Rugby-wise, brothers are going well. We've started well. The Reds have had a bit of a mixed bag, but started pretty well. And I'm involved with the Brumbies a little because the firm I'm doing a bit of work for, Gallagher, principal sponsors of Rugby Australia, and now we're principal sponsor of the Brumbies, so that makes for an interesting mix. I was down there when they played the Reds in the Brumbies box with all the Brumbies heavies and my Reds hat on, so probably inappropriate, but we won at the death, 2 tries in about 4 minutes, so it was an exceptional day.
Yes, and your involvement with Gullivers, do you want to talk about that and how that came about?
I've taken a few trips away with Gullivers. I've taken 3 World Cup trips, which have been sensational. And Gullivers are awesome. They do magnificent trips. So we're gearing up for a trip to Argentina in end of August, early September. The Wallabies play 2 tests against the Argentinians in Salta and Mendoza up in the country. So, yeah, there's a program in place for that. We've already got about 10 committed to it. So, that should be a fabulous trip.
I was going to say the 2-test series in Argentina, that doesn't come out so often, does it? Or has it happened before?
Not in the new series now. Instead of playing home and away, we'll play them both in Argentina, and next year they'll play 2 in Australia. I went over.
I was going to say there's something about rugby and travelling and watching rugby and doing some things off the field as well. Growing up and going over to seeing the Fanatics tours and going to the West Indies and stuff for cricket, in my view, it's probably dropped off a little bit, but I'd sense there's a bit of resurgence of tagging on events now. And can you talk about how much fun it is?
Oh, the rugby tours have been well supported. Gullivers have multiple in the past for World Cups, particularly have had a number of trips, whether that's the lead-up games or the like last year we went to the quarters, semis and final. So we didn't get to see the Wallabies play because they were out of it by then, unfortunately. But they typically put up a number of options.
And Tony, let's go back to your grassroots rugby. Where did that come about from? What was it about the game of rugby that got you involved and has stayed with you through your life?
I went to Terrace, so I played for a couple of years in the first, but I was at a reunion and I got reminded by one of the fellows who's a High Court judge. He said, I remember when Shuri and I played in the second row together, and I'm thinking, oh, I don't think he was in the first. He was relating to our time in the 13 Cs. Yeah. So I ended up playing first for a couple of years, and then after school finished, I went down to Brothers, and it all sort of happened from there.
What was it, or is it about rugby that you love?
Oh, I just love the game, the passion, the commitment, the physicality, contact. Winning, although losing's a big part of learning how to win. But we've been very successful over the time at Brothers and the Wallabies when I played. The Reds, we were fortunate to have a really successful era in all of those, parts of it. So, it was sensational. And it's fun. It's fun. And you mentioned the Gullivers tour, but, the touring in those days was next level. I mean, one or two of the tours, which were 3.5 months long. 3.5 months in the UK with your best mates, playing for your country, playing 23 matches and travelling every 4 or 5 days. So,
I sense the connection in sport is something which is talked about a little bit more frequently now around mental health and wellness, and in terms of common interests and values and friendships, etc. Can you talk about that impact in your life in regards to the people that you played with in the 13Cs all the way through to the Wallabies, etc., and how they connect in your life?
but the camaraderie and mateship from rugby is enormous. I mean, and people I played with at Brothers are still coming down to Crosby Park every Saturday for home games. You know, there's a very strong alumni, not so much from the school days, but more so from Brothers. And, you know, I think you encourage kids that, you know, might be in their early 20s and thinking about giving it away, and you go, play footy as long as you can, enjoy it, make the best of it, even if you might not be able to train as much. You might want to, you know, play down the ranks a little bit, but keep playing, because that mateship and the camaraderie is hugely important. Hugely important.
Yeah, I'm sensing, obviously, because there's dollars hanging, the fruit is rich when you make it as a professional now. So therefore, at the younger level, there's a bit more intensity and a bit more competition. I'm curious what you're thinking of that in regards to some people that are maybe ultra competitive and specialising in a sport early on, and maybe, you know, others dropping off because it is so competitive.
I think they're identifying, well, I know they're identifying players at a much earlier age and putting them in programs to build them up to come through. And typically, but people mature at different ages. And I think sometimes selectors and people involved in teams say, well, we've spent so much money on this guy bringing him through, yet there might be another player who's, you know, performing better at that age. But it's just that he's developing it, you know, different skills, you know, as they mature. So sometimes those players make it harder to make an impact, if you know what I mean. Well, I think we've missed the boat a little bit to some extent. You've got Aussie rules and NRL, they're massive machines. We've lost a fair bit of money over the time. We've lost our way a little, even though the Wallabies have been playing well. But I'm encouraged at the moment because Rugby Australia has been made a lot of money this year off the back of the British Lions, so they're not skint. So it depends now how well we use those funds to bring the game through. But we're identifying players a lot earlier than we did, because League always identified them at 13, 14 and contracted them. It might only be, you know, a couple of $1,000, but they're contracted, you know, and they have this aura of being part of the code and the team. So I think we're doing that a lot better these days. Our participation rate from juniors and women in particular is improving significantly. So reading a few of the results of what's happening with Rugby Australia, it's quite exciting at the moment. But we have lost our way. We're well behind the 8 ball with League and AFL. Still got a great product in Super Rugby and obviously the Wallabies. But the Wallabies need to perform, and in Super Rugby we need to be beating the Kiwi sides regularly.
Yeah, talking about high performance, the All Blacks per se and the New Zealand teams in Super Rugby, from a rugby fan point of view, we haven't won the Bledisloe for so long. Do you reckon that could be a catalyst if we, a minor catalyst or a major catalyst if the Wallabies start beating the All Blacks?
Well, I think, definitely when we're beating the All Blacks, but we've also got to be winning more consistently, because we had a spike last couple of years where we played well and we're winning some games. Then we go to the UK last year and we don't win a match. So from those highs where people are getting excited, and particularly when Harry Wilson took that decision up in Townsville against Argentina, where we could have drawn the match. It was on full time. He's in front of the post and he says, I don't want to draw. He said, I'm going to win this. So he's gone for the line, taken the line out. And I think about another 5 or 7 minutes later, we in extra time, we scored a try, which gave us the win. So I think that message from Harry to say, I want to win games, I don't just want to compete and draw, brought a lot of emotion from Wallaby supporters, and we were delighted at that, But we need to be winning more regularly.
Winning more regularly, and we've got the 30 years of Super Rugby, and we've got the World Cup next year. So it's kind of like, and we have the Lions as well. So the calendar's in the favour. It's just you believe is results driven from the top, and then consistent results, and then leading into the World Cup. You never know what happens in the World Cup, right?
Yeah, but club rugby's strong. Brisbane club rugby's strong. Sydney club rugby's strong, but it's just important we get our Super Rugby sides winning against Kiwi sides, particularly in New Zealand, and that's an opportunity this weekend with the round in Christchurch where they're playing all the fixtures at the new stadium. So that would be wonderful if we could win a few of those games.
And Tony, from being a player to being in governance and management and leadership roles, obviously leadership roles during as a player now, how does the rugby lens change from you being off the field versus on the field? And how did you go with that?
I became, at club level, I was president of Brothers and involved in Brothers, and you're never sort of not involved at club level. You're sort of always down there watching and providing some influence, hopefully. But then I was president of Queensland Rugby for a few years, and then president of Rugby Australia for a couple of years. That's a wonderful experience to be involved at that level, but I've done nothing since then. So I'm a spectator like you are. No special privileges. We just watch as many games as we can and influence where we can, and obviously promote the game.
What were some of the decisions or leadership traits that you thought you did well whilst you were in charge of those particular roles?
The president role is a more a titular role. There's obviously you sit in the board meetings and have a say, but you don't have a vote. You have obviously a CEO, chairman, and the board predominantly making decisions, but you have some influence. So it's great to have a view and be heard.
And when it comes to leadership per se, were you always interested in leadership, and do you study leadership and look at other leaders or look at other sporting leaders or business leaders?
Not really. It's sort of I think it's come naturally. I was captain of the first 15. I was captain of the Queensland under 16 sides. But I think that's about wanting to do well. It's about caring for the other players, being interested in their welfare, looking after people, and making decisions on the paddock rather than waiting from a note from the sideline as to what you should be doing. I'm a great believer that you're on the paddock for 40 minutes and you make the decisions, and you don't need to be having a coach or anyone influencing you as to how you want to play the game. So, I enjoy leadership. At one stage I thought leadership couldn't be taught, but I think I've changed my mind on that. I think it can be taught to be a leader, but for me it was an inherent. That's me. I just want to make decisions and do the right thing on the paddock and hopefully win. And that's transferred onto business as well. I've had some leadership roles in insurance broking, so and that's been a lot of fun.
The competitive nature in you, out of a scale of 0 to 100, where do you sit?
Oh, pretty well up there.
Even in the family card game?
Oh, yes, yeah. The kids, if they're good enough to win, they deserve to win, but there's no quarters given, I've got to tell you. to one stage, my youngest son beat me at sheet and then ended up dancing on the table. And then when we next went on a skiing trip, I got a poster made about me being the world champion sheet player and invitations to matches, And he was very cranky. He said, "Right, I'll play you now." I said, "No, it's by invitation, Andrew. If you're good enough, you'll be invited to play. There's a process." Oh, he wasn't happy. Families are very competitive, aren't they?
Yes, and just on that competitiveness, and everyone loves winning, and I get that, but your views on winning and maybe in your life of rugby, have you reckon the ledger of wins versus losses where you're at in terms of a percentage basis?
I think I'm up. The school didn't help much. I think in the last year when I was captain at Terrace, our best result was a draw against Brisbane Grammar. Didn't win a game. And then brothers, a couple of years in the Colts, we won one premiership and then straight in the first grade won 3 premierships and then ended up 5 in a row at one stage. But I think I played 11 grand finals at brothers and won 9. And the winning rate at Queensland would have been in the 90% range, I would have thought. And Wallabies, don't know if we won most of our test series in Australia in those days. We had difficulties in the UK when we went over and with the conditions and they were kicking around the corner. We were toe kicking, so we didn't kick enough goals. Yeah, it was a pretty successful, very successful era.
And looking back at the most successful teams that you've played in, those premiership winning teams, if you sort of analyse them from afar, what do you think made them, or the components that made them so good? And looking back at teams now and looking at various selection policies, etc., and whatever it might be, what do you think are the key ingredients to a successful team?
Well, it's interesting. There's one of my coaches passed away the other day, Dallas O'Neill, who was a captain of Queensland and the Wallabies. He coached us when I was 20, 1973, 4, 5, won 3 premierships. But Dallas, at one stage, he walked out at halftime and said, "You effed it, you fixed it," turned around and walked off. And at training, he was renowned for coaching from the bar. But me as a 20-year-old, and then you've got Dick Cox and David Lestrange, who were the leaders of the side, who were in their late 20s, late 20s at that stage. We're getting together going, "Well, Dallas is going to come down at the end of training. What do we know? What have we learned? What do we need to do?" So here's me as a 20-year-old involved with the rest of the team. We're working it out, and then Dallas would come down after training and say, what have you done? What have you worked out? So he'd then analyse that and say, well, hang on, a bit more of that and a bit less of that. So that was sort of an interesting process that we had to, and we owned it. We owned it because it got built from the ground up, And there's a fair bit to be said about that you can be overcoached, I think. But, teams are interesting things, aren't they? I think the fact that your great mates make a difference. You're honest with each other. You understand each other's faults and weaknesses and what players are good at and what they're not. We've always got the players who are, 90, 95% commitment and, less ability, and those with the big ability and not so committed, and you've got to mix all those personalities and abilities into a team. But, teams are fascinating. Fascinating things, aren't they? And the same relates to business, exactly the same. Yeah.
I was just going to say that. What were some of the traits that you saw during your career in rugby and business that were sort of pet hates and or almost behaviours that you don't tolerate, really?
Oh, I just don't like selfish people to start with, and big noters, but I think communication, sharing, trusting people, giving them opportunities, not as a leader at whatever level of leadership, not telling people how to do it, and encouraging people to come up with a solution how they might fix a certain problem or win a certain account. But communication is huge, I think, just explaining why we're doing things, tell them how the business is working, what's winning, what's not, the results. I think that's a major factor in leadership.
And then also from a clear thinking decision-making point of view, how did you think about decisions? Were you a deep thinker around data and strategy, or were you more of at a whim, in terms of making decisions? How do you think about that?
Well, there wasn't much data and strategy. It wasn't until Darryl Hardbright, who was a Wallaby coach, came in 1978 or something. He got Paul McLean and I together to go to Sydney for a long weekend before we played, I think it was Wales, a couple of the UK sides. And we analysed their play, which we'd never, ever done before. We'd never used to watch videos of opposition. We'd have a plan in place, so whoever coached us, but we wouldn't watch too many videos, but he broke it down to line-outs, where they threw the line-outs, the scrums, and also, importantly, where the referee stood, and what the decisions the referee made. So we managed didn't manage the referee, but he got stats on the referee and the decisions and where he stood in line-outs, whether it was on our side or their side, as if he's refereeing us more than the opposition. So that was a whole new bit of a revolution for us. But in the era I played in, there was not a lot of data or strategy. And irrespective of what strategy was for a game, you're on the paddock, and if I happen to be captain, I'd be making the decisions didn't have to consult with other players or think, I've made it. Should I be referring it back to Tempo or to Darryl or to Brock as coaches? No, you make the decisions on the paddock. You live and die by your decisions.
Yeah, no, that's a great way of looking at things. In terms of, you mentioned some teammates there, and you mentioned about your mateship and whatnot during the team. Was there one particular player that you would trust the most in a tight test match? One person that you stood out, I suppose, from the rest of the pack?
Well, a lot of my career I played with Paul McLean. So I played 112 games for Queensland. He played 100 games, very precise, 1,000 points, 100 games. But Paul was he drove us around the paddock. He was a magnificent tactician, goal kicker. And people, Mark Ella was playing in that era, and Paul played in front of him in a lot of tests. Mark, spontaneous player, fabulous player, but Paul was more strategic than Mark. But Paul was definitely for brothers, for Queensland, for Australia. Paul and I played most of our games together.
And then looking at some of the players that are coming through now, some of the youth players, and you see a lot of rugby and watch a lot of rugby, what do you look for now in a player that you think, actually that particular player could make it to the highest level and be a great player?
I think it's consistency. Players can always have a one-off, a great game, everything goes their way, they're up in lights. But I think the consistency, backing up week after week after week, particularly at the moment, particularly in Super Rugby and Test matches, we're playing so many Test matches. They're playing week after week after week. So that ability to refresh, recharge, and get back is really important.
Now, I always ask my guests around their favourite all-time sporting moment, but I preface this by saying that it doesn't include yourself. It's something that potentially you could watch on the TV or YouTube 10,000 times and not get sick of it. I'm curious, Tony, have you got an all-time favourite sporting moment?
I think it's close to home. It's 2011 where we won the Super Rugby title against Christchurch, and I've got no idea of the score, but I know it was definitely against Canterbury. And then, very, very, very late in the piece, about the halfway line, not making much progress. And Will Genya, as you will recall, gathers the ball, goes to pass, dummies, shimmy, sprint for the line. And I was president of Queensland Rugby at the time, so made it even more special. And then to see all the celebrations, and then later when that massive trophy gets presented, Kevin Hall standing there with it well above his head in one hand, that was fabulous. That was a long time coming, and it was a fabulous game.
I tell you what, I was there at the semi-final the week before, and I was in shock the week before as well, going, we're hosting a home.
Hosting a final, exactly. We're in the President's Suite, and obviously told the staff that they weren't going home early, and when we left several hours later, all the gates to the venue were locked. We had to do the full circuit, find a security guard to let us in. He said, and he was in astonishment, "Where have you guys come from?" I said, the chairman's suite. He went, "Oh, geez, okay." So he let us out so we could do some more celebrating.
I do recall that semi-final night. That probably was one of my last times in my life that I'd been out all night.
Is that right?
Final, I think I was still after the final. It was a late night, but nowhere near as late as the semi. I think the semi-final was just I think it was Auckland. I can't remember who was the semi-final.
Yeah, I can't recall. So you didn't back up, mate, eh? Not as ferociously as before.
Yeah, but anyway, that's a great moment to share. And I did see that the other day, some highlights of that. I think.
We had the reunion the other day and invited the players back to the games.
And some players still playing the game. 15 years later? Still, yeah? I think James O'Connor?
James still playing overseas? Yeah.
Maybe there's not other ones. I can't remember. Maybe is there any rugby league players floating around? There was a good team.
Oh, great team. I wouldn't be surprised if Will's. I wouldn't be surprised if Will's playing because he's as fit as buggery.
Yep. And we've got a couple of sponsors at Scoreboard, the podcast, and they help us continue to tell stories from the game of sport. And one of them is SwiftX, which is also the Super Rugby
partner, yes.
The rugby partner SwiftX, and they've got over 1.5 million users here in Australia and New Zealand. And as part of their campaign, Where Can Crypto Take You? And if you go to the rugby, you'll see Where Can Rugby Take You and Where Can a few different things take you. But as part of their partnership with Scoreboard, we run a little segment called the SwiftX Bucket List. And this is a bucket sporting event that you haven't attended live, Tony, that ultimately you would love to attend.
I'd like to go to a World Cup final with Australia playing. So any time Australia makes a World Cup final of a World Cup, I'd love to be there. I mentioned before, I took the Gulliver's tour to France, and we were there for the final, but that was South Africa and the Kiwis. So it doesn't have the same aura or atmosphere, wonderful atmosphere with the Stade de France, but you don't have the passion. You're having a beers and you're enjoying the whole environment, but not the same. So if the Wallabies were playing in a final, I'd definitely want to be there. And hopefully next year.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got the clock ticking. You've got the budget saving for next year to get the tickets and pay for
putting a few bucks aside.
Yeah, that's right. And speaking of putting a few bucks aside, we also have a partner in Pocketsmith. And Pocketsmith is a personal finance app for the household CFO, the one keeping the budget in check, paying the bill and kicking goals. Over 80,000 Aussies use Pocketsmith to track their spending and see their net worth and plan ahead. The question that we ask our guests on Scoreboard is, are you the CFO of your household? Do you budget, Tony?
I should be, I am, but I'm not great at it.
I'm the same. So we use Pocketsmith as a family, but a lot of people use spreadsheets and whatnot. But a big shout out to the team there for helping support the stories of sport. Now, we also have a little partnership, and the reason why this part of the reason why this podcast is going ahead with the International Rugby Memes Club. And that's Dan and the crew do some great stuff with rugby and helping promote the game globally. We've got a couple of questions that we ask as part of that partnership. And the first one is the best sledge you've ever heard on a rugby field.
Best sledge? Rugby's a gentleman's game. There's hardly any sledges on the paddock, mate. Serious?
Sledges on the rugby game.
No
okay, let's try this. What about the funniest moment on the rugby field that you remember?
I reckon Stan Pilecki, one of the legends of the game, front rower, Polish background, the man who doesn't bleed, you'd get the big cut over the eye and the head, there'd be no blood, it'd just be a white, sort of viscous sort of material coming out of him. Anyway, Stan was a giant of a man, but he'd be sitting on the sideline particularly when Bob Templeton was coach, when the Wallabies were playing. He'd have to go on as a replacement. He reckons the hardest thing he's ever done in rugby. He'd be on the sideline having a cigarette, and Tempo would be having a bit of a puff at the same time. So when he asked, it was time for Stan to go on, Stan reckons one of the hardest things he's ever done in rugby, throws a cigarette to the ground, and obviously with the studded shoes, he said the hardest thing I've ever done is trying to get the cigarette out before Tempo's at me to run onto the paddock.
And to potentially light the grass on fire.
Oh, geez. Who else do you know that smokes on the sideline of a test match as a reserve, and the coach is beside you and he lets you do it? Stan was one of the characters of the game, I'll tell you. Wonderful.
And what about any tour stories that can be shared on a podcast?
Oh, tour stories. One of the wonderful things about the long tours to the UK is we had audiences with the Queen. And when was that, the 3.5 month tour, 75, 76, there was the Queen, Prince Charles and Princess Anne, the three of them there, and we gathered in groups around them, and having conversations in the circle and asking, what do you do and how's the tour going? And just so as this went on, the audience where Charles was got a bit more raucous and laughter, and a couple of us around the Queen talking at the time, "Excuse me, Mum," as we backed out. So people gradually generated across to where Charles was, and it's Stu McDougall, who was an absolute character, front rower, inviting Charles across to Australia to go to the King's Cross, and all the pleasures of King's Cross, and Charles was delighted in the conversation. It wasn't the boring bullshit that went on in other audiences that I'm sure that he's had. And it ended up Stewie and Charles in the middle of the group, basically, just the conversation going back and forth about touring and about, what Stewart got up to. And it was wonderful. And then that same visit to the Queen, we're on the bus afterwards. And Ray Price was playing rugby at that time. That was his last rugby tour. He walks onto the bus and hear this clanging, thinking, "Pricey, what have you got?" He's got cups, he's got knives and forks and things down in his blazer. He said, "Stuff 'em, I've got lots of money, they can afford it. I'm part of the bloody, Commonwealth. They deserve to give me this shit," with a few swear words in between. So he bought us some souvenirs, you can say, from the Buckingham Palace. Lees, mate, Lees.
The free cutlery.
Exactly. He deserved it, mate. He deserved it.
There you go. Now, one final question, Tony, for the aspiring rugby player currently who loves the game, who's of maybe 15 or 17, is passionate, wants to play at the highest level. Some piece of advice.
Well, obviously, level of fitness is important, but that mental approach is just as important. So, getting the head straight where you want to be, set your goals, share those with someone else, whether that's your father or mother or someone that you respect in rugby or your coach. And just play every game, I think, as your last, because so many people have injuries these days that stop them from playing footy. So, yeah, it's a fairly simple message, but give it everything you've got whenever you play, because you don't know whether that's going to be your last game or not.
It's a great way to finish, and also a great outlook on life in terms of business and decisions.
But also one other thing, enjoy your rugby. That's very important.
Absolutely. I think people inherently are better at things when they enjoy it. So if you enjoy it,
absolutely.
In anything in life, if you enjoy, I enjoy podcasting, and you always improve. You improve the interviewing. There's always a level of improvement if you enjoy something and you want to do more, which I think is a good, healthy habit in life. Tony Shaw, thank you so much for being part of Scoreboard, the podcast today, and sharing your views. Also, if anyone wants to get in touch in regards to that Argentinian tour with Gullivers with you, what's best should they do?
Best to contact Gullivers, mate. They've got a great brochure out. It's late August, early September, 10 days away, 2 tests. Buenos Aires, Iguazu Falls.
Lots of things to do.
Couple of test matches.
Couple of test matches of rugby. The Wallabies, hopefully.
And a lot of fun.
And a lot of fun. Excellent. Thank you so much, Tony, and great to catch up, and looking forward to following your progress and looking forward to that tour.
Cheers, Chris. Go the Wallabies.
Thank you, Tony.
This has been another episode of Scoreboard with Chris Titley. Go back and check out some of the other episodes you might have missed.